Welcome back, Camden Catholic. Oh, man. Classes are changing into 7th period, I think, right now. A bunch of y'all are walking around out in the hallway. It's kind of weird that I'm, like, talking to you from in the past. So I just want to let you know. I just saw some people just waved it. There's Alex, Squalacito, however you say her last name. She's in my homeroom. Who else is out there? Vince Barreras just ran by. So Ben Pascal. He's a weird kid. Lennon D. Simone, if you know him, he's a sophomore. Now, anyway, so check it out. Let's get into what we started on today in class, though. We're talking about the Industrial Revolution, how it spanned from 1750 to 1850, right? So we started talking about, yay, pictures! Like good, solid photography. We talked about how early on most things were handmade, leading to the textile industry, common forms of transportation were all handmade, horse-drawn carriages, boats were like paddled, what else? Or wind-powered, right? And then most of your textile stuff was made at home by hand. And then the last thing I would say is, what was it? Production, made by hand, transportation, all like that. Oh, and like your agricultural laborers were all like required a huge amount of a workforce due to the fact that everybody worked one at a time. Well, there are several major inventions that come along that are going to change all that, right? So let's talk about those things really quick. In your notes, you should have 3 separate headings. You should have a transportation heading, a production heading, and then you should have a, what's the third one? Agricultural heading, right? Thank you, Jill. I heard you. Thank you for shouting that out. So, getting into it, though, let's talk transportation first. So, the transportation is also going to affect the production later on, but I like to talk about it first because it makes the most sense. So, there's this guy named Thomas Newcomen, and then there's another guy named Savary, and they come up with the ideas called write this down, the steam engine. Changed everything about transportation, a little bit about production, but particularly transportation. So the steam engine was a major, major invention. The guy that actually really invents it, write this down, or the common one that you know of, is named James Watt, all right? That's why we measured certain electrical outputs in watts, right? So anyway, the steam engine, though, is radically going to revolutionize a lot of different stuff, particularly that of moving products, like you see in the steam-powered locomotive down in your bottom right-hand corner. And then also it's going to be used later on in the production aspect that we're about to talk about in about 2 seconds. The original use of steam engines was actually to pump water out of mines when they were in there trying to dig around and find coal and iron deposits. We'll talk about coal and iron here in a few minutes, okay? Now, next invention that you need to write down is in the production aspect. Write this down somewhere with a little star. Most of the Industrial Revolution relates to the production of textiles, all right? Textiles being cloth, all right? Now, going forward, the way that cloth used to be made, again, is much like right here, by hand on a lap loom, okay? So what's going to be used later on, though, to spin thread multiple times, there's going to be an invention that comes around, and it's right here. Write it down. It's called the spinning jenny, all right? The spinning jenny actually made it so one woman or man would revolve that handle, and it would spin wool into thread after it had already been like combed out, spin it into thread, and it did the labor of 10 people in one machine, right? Then another invention is going to come along. It's right here. It's called the water frame. It's where you eliminate the woman from going like this, and then you attach the thing to a water wheel, right? And then the water actually pulls the levers around and spins the thread automatically, right? Great inventions right there. Then the third one is called the power loom, right? And the power loom took the steam engine and then applied it to the production aspect, and it was fully automated and it ran, okay? So that's one of your 3 of your other big inventions. We got 4 total right now. We got the steam engine by James Watt, and then we got the spinning jenny, the water frame, and the power loom, okay? So the third one that we have that's in the agricultural sector that's going to be massively important is this guy right here. He's called a seed, S-E-E-D, hyphen drill, okay? The seed drill, invented by a man named Jethro Tull in the earliest phases of the Industrial Revolution in the countryside of England, right? So the seed drill, as you can see, what its big thing was, it reduced, write this down, reduced the amount of labor needed on farms, okay? So check this thing out. The hardest part of the season for farmers was planting and harvesting, okay? So the planting aspect took a long time because you had to have like one plow going with a mule, and it cut rows one at a time, and then individuals had to come behind and put the seeds down, okay, and actually plant everything one at a time. The seed drill made this automated. So one mule under the guidance of a man would actually lead this thing forward, and you see these little plows right here, they would cut into the dirt, and then the vibrations of the cart moving along the field, they would have seeds filled up in these two chambers, and it would just go tut, 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 and just drop seeds into the dirt, and it would be then covered back up again by a little rake in the back. So it's a genius invention. It took the need of 10 to 20 workers and then reduced it to only one guy and a horse, okay? So the Industrial Revolution is a major lifestyle change, okay? So one thing you need to know about first and foremost, though, after the inventions is where it all started. Anybody want to take a guess where it all started? Brent, I heard you, but not in France. Anybody else? Lucas, I heard you, but no, not in Germany. Anybody? Shauna Trimsky, I heard you, but no, not in Finland. I don't know where you're coming out with that guy. But in... Very nice job, Sophie. That is exactly right. It started in Britain, okay? So the Industrial Revolution is going to leap off in Britain in about 1750, okay? So it's the home of the Industrial Revolution for several particular reasons. The reason why Britain was home to the Industrial Revolution are as follows. Number one, they had a large and established, overseas trading lines, okay? So they were very, very good about moving product. Second of all, a relative period of peace where they weren't involved in any wars like the rest of the continent was with Napoleon also helped them progress forward. And then the third thing was due to the large deposits of these two goods, coal and iron, okay? Huge, huge, huge amounts of coal and iron were the reasons why Britain was the home of the Industrial Revolution in about 1750. Now, their revolution ended around 1815, but by 1850, some of you are like, oh, you said this goes to 1850. You're right, I did say this goes to 1850. But when I'm talking about the 1850 mark, we're mainly talking about the continent, okay? France, Germany, Italy, the rest of them caught up to Britain by 1850, okay? Well, let's keep going. So, then you're going to have a big problem. Listen closely and then answer this question. All right, so if the spinning jenny and the water frame of the power loom, not to mention the steam engine, not to mention the seed drill, reduce the need for workers in the country, well, then where are all of them going to go? That is dead on the money, the exact right answer I was looking for there, Hayden Lyons. That's right. They're going to migrate, okay? So what they decide to do is they decide to start moving into the cities and take jobs in these new factories that are popping up. Due to the steam engine, due to the power loom, due to all these new inventions, production becomes much easier, okay? Now, however, you need people to run these machines. So the process of urbanization rose up, which was the movement of people to cities. There is a constant demand for factory workers as businesses began to grow, okay? A good example of this growth is right here in Manchester, United Kingdom, which became a massive hub for production. So they only had 17,000 people in 1755, but then the Industrial Revolution kicks up. And by 1780, they had 40,000 people that had immigrated in due to urbanization, right? And then by 1801, you've got 70,000 people. The exponential, ridiculous growth is going to be led to the fact because they didn't need as many laborers in the countryside anymore. So the Industrial Revolution was a massive trend. Now, with this influx of people, your social classes are going to change a little bit, all right? So write this down really quick. Oh, well, no, you're good. New social classes, right? So back before the Industrial Revolution, we had the what system? What was it called? Good job, Liam O'Connor. That's right. The feudal system in all of Europe, okay? Now, in the feudal system, you were either of higher ranking class or a very low ranking class, right? There was no middle. Well, the Industrial Revolution brings birth to the industrial middle class. The middle class was born out of the Industrial Revolution. Oh, Mr. Terry, what about the bourgeois that existed in France? Well, really quickly, now remember, France's revolution started in 1789, so we're backtracking a little bit. So those bourgeois members are products of this revolution, right? I just didn't want to get you too confused leading into some other stuff, okay? So, because remember, this is all about a change of lifestyle and habits and the way that you actually go through every day. Not necessarily like a linear chronological thing, okay? So it's a theme. Now, But the industrial middle class is going to be ruled over by people who own and operate private businesses. They own railroads. They own factories. They are entrepreneurs, right? Oh, Adam Smith is just jumping up and down in his grave because his capitalist baby is beginning to work, right? So the industrial working class is then going to grow out of that as well, which is your lower end of the urban classes, kind of like your urban workers in France. They are very poor. Typically, they live in very, very rough apartment-like dwellings. They live in tenement housing in the United States is what it was called. As many as 20 people could be living in one room together at once. So you have your middle class, and then you have your working class, right? So speaking of your working class, we've got to talk about the interaction that the lifestyle of the people that actually worked inside these factories, right? So the conditions in the factories were very, very harsh, all right? You worked very, very long hours. Usually your shifts lasted anywhere from 12 to 16 hours. The machines also had absolutely no safety mechanisms on them whatsoever. So very, very important that we understand that. So what I mean by safety mechanism, a really good example, have any of you ever, like, when you lift open the washer, and y'all got a top-loading washing machine, when you lift up the lid, what happens on the spin cycle? Psh, stops, cuts off, right? That's a safety mechanism because there's a little lever. I'll tell you a story about it tomorrow. Don't let me forget. But there's a little lever on the inside that when it gets pushed down, the spin cycle kicks back on again, okay? But that's a safety mechanism. And so, you know, like little teeny tiny little, like Katrina Butler doesn't like stick her hand down in the, the spin cycle and like mess anything up. So factories also had zero to no ventilation, leading to very, very harsh conditions. Also, that can give you certain sicknesses like pneumonia or emphysema, right? Because they actually are breathing in that terrible air all day. They're also insanely hot, right? Because the machines are putting off a lot of heat. Now, workers also, if you got sick, or couldn't work, you were fired. Now, machine operators are typically going to be women because they could use the machines easier, and they also were going to be paid about half of what a man got paid. Men were still used predominantly for heavy labor. So whenever you saw your machine operators, they were usually particularly women. So this is also going to encourage the growth of mining culture because the Industrial Revolution created a higher demand for iron and coal, right? They had to be mined from underground. So miners are going to be paid more, but conditions are worse than the factories. So they're going to work in practical darkness, and coal very easily could coat their lungs, leading to a disease known as black lung disease, okay? So I want to keep on going. Now, child labor during the Industrial Revolution is a big problem too, all right? So child labor was a huge issue because it was like children had some of the most dangerous jobs, okay? Children started working in the Industrial Revolution as early as 5 years old. Okay. Now, your industrial middle class children, they weren't doing these things. Okay. Now, children of the working class, though, worked in mines hauling carts and also opening ventilation shafts within the mines. They also were used and employed to repair machines in the factories because their hands were small enough to actually fit inside of the machines. So these power looms, right, when they're actually creating these things of fabric, all the fabric, eventually, it all starts out as just one single thread. Well, have any of y'all ever seen your Christmas lights whenever you try to hang them up at the beginning of the season? Yeah, they're all bunched up, right? Now imagine it's inside of a machine, though. So they would use kids to actually reach their hands in there and untangle the lines on the insides of the power looms. But since there were no safety mechanisms, the machine would just kick back on once the tangle had been undone. And a lot of times kids' hands would get caught in there, leading to some permanent disfigurements and also like possibly being able to remove their hand completely. Now, the results of the Industrial Revolution, though, I don't talk a lot about the Industrial Revolution in my CV classes because I'm trying to get into World War I, okay? So we don't want to waste too much time. The positives, though, there's going to be more jobs. Wages are going to increase. Actually, wages increase so much in some areas that people used to wear like little $5 bill notes in their caps to try and signify that they were a worker in a factory. Costs are going to begin to come down because factory-produced goods are cheaper than those that are made by hand. You're also going to have the rise of labor unions, organizations that are made to fight for the right of workers, okay, and try to get away from some of these negative working conditions. However, the negatives of the Industrial Revolution include, number one, people are going to die due to it, right? People are going to be worked practically to death. The mines are going to cost a lot of lives. Different things, or diseases are also going to claim lives as well. Terrible working conditions is a massive negative as well. And then also not to mention the fact that pollution was a huge issue. Runoff and like hazardous materials from factories were just dumped into freshwater rivers. The River Thames in England, they say that it was so polluted that it could have caught fire. So that's insane. Also, many children are going to lose hands and fingers and things like that and die from mining-related diseases. So child labor is a huge negative, all right? Now, a couple of things that are going to pop up in the Industrial Revolution have to do with new ways of thinking, okay? So you've got laissez-faire economics being one of those things, all right? So that's when there's no government intervention in business whatsoever. So no longer is it like the mercantile system of France under Louis XIV where he owned everything, all the businesses and everything, all the money coming in. But now it's owned by private business holders in a thing called laissez-faire economics. Also, socialism is going to pop up due to the Industrial Revolution, which is a very radical view of society and the idea that the community owns business, not private individual. It discourages individualism, and it's the idea that a community comes together and that they mutually share off the labor of others, because according to socialists, capitalists, or wages are just, profits by capitalists are just stolen wages, is what Marx was famously said. Because Karl Marx, you know who Marx is? Oh, wait, of course you don't. Anyway, but we'll get there in a second. So these are some of the huge negatives and things like that, and also different cultural impacts of the Industrial Revolution. So you have urbanization and overcrowding right here, which is a big problem. You have a child's hand right there that was disfigured by a machine. You have Oliver Twist right here, which was a post-industrial novel written by Charles Dickens discussing children's workhouses and things like that were actually, if you were an orphan, you got shipped to a workhouse. It's a whole thing. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Then you got the pollution right here as well with all the dead animals and things like that, and materials ending up in the river from the factories. You have families living in crowded housing. That's just a cute baby in a drawer. I thought it was adorable. And then also you have slum-like, very bad neighborhoods of major cities popping up. Now we've got Karl Marx and communism. Now, Karl Marx, a very, very famous thinker from this time period in post-industrial revolutionary thought, is going to lead up an idea called communism, all right? So as the Industrial Revolution began to grow and businesses began to make a load of money, a ton of money, Marx begins to look around and he sees that, you know, it seems to me that people are being treated worse and making less while these people who own these businesses don't do anything and make all of this money. Because Marx develops the idea where basically take the feudal system in that triangle, let's flip it upside down and make the workers the ones who lead society. And that was his utopia, the idea of a perfect society. His idea was communism, which is an extreme form of socialism, okay? So right, extreme form of socialism, where there are no such thing as classes. And all people are equal in income, homes, etc. Because communism says that the idea is that our communities own the businesses and the means of production is owned by the worker. The means of production is a really big part of that right there. If we can get into the Russian Revolution this year, I do a whole spiel on communism, all right? Now, it's the idea that all people are supposed to make the same amount of money and that everyone is supposed to share and reap the benefits of the society and that no one is inherently better than anyone else, right? On paper, communism is a great idea, but because it promotes equality and the idea of community, however, it's not really, it's never been executed effectively or properly, and it also doesn't make much sense with societies that we have that are so large, okay? And also, capitalism's not too shabby. Like, I like this tie. And I bought it. You know what I mean? Because I worked and, like, I bought it. Like, so, you know what I'm saying. But it's another one of the great isms of this time period. So we'll also eventually talk about imperialism will be our very last ism. And I skip over liberalism, conservatism, because you'll end up going over that stuff in US 1. But that's it on this flip, right? We just did the Industrial Revolution pretty much in a nutshell like that. So very good job, guys. I will see you guys tomorrow. I really enjoyed it. Hope you all have a great evening.